What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my first impressions for Forsaken Realms of Vahrin's Call, an indie RPG from developer Titan Rock, who is also publishing it. And this game has been on my radar for a little bit, namely because of the things it is clearly inspired by, such as Fable. But before we dive too far into that, I do need to inform you that this game actually releases in about 5 or so days on the 27th, and thus I'm able to bring you this video because I was given early access to it via Titan Rock, which is how I'm able to bring you this video. Now, my understanding is the review embargo is lifting right now. I've had it in my hands for about a week, but I've only played it for a few hours due to some scheduling stuff on my end, but I do plan to fully review it, hopefully right around the game's actual release date. But with that said, let's talk about the rest of this. Now, I will be perfectly honest with you guys, I did not go in to this game expecting anything grand, and I will say it surprised me in the sense that even just a few hours in, you can tell there's a good bit of fun to be had, even if it's not the most die-hard RPG out there. There's a pretty good sense of humor, and I think that's especially important given that the visuals are, let's all be honest, a little underwhelming. In particular, I would say the character models don't look particularly great, but everything else is, I think, serviceable given that it's an indie title. But first, let's start with a basic story setup. So, this game centers around the city of Vahrin, a city that has been dealing with some troubles lately. In particular, they were beset by these insect-like beasts, and after a pretty big battle with them, their king lies dead. And at this point, the city is mainly just trying to hire mercenaries and keep itself from completely falling apart, which is where you come in. You are, in fact, one of those mercenaries that takes up that call and heads to Vahrin here in order to hopefully make some gold and discover some other purpose along the way, as you're obviously going to get roped into the larger narrative from there. Now, I couldn't spoil more than that if I wanted to, because that's about as far as I am into it. In order to actually fight the various enemies that you will be coming into contact with, you get to engage with the game's classless progression system, which is going to see you both leveling by doing, that is to say getting better with certain types of skills as you use them, but also doing things like earning skill points by leveling up, as well as picking up skill books to actually spend those skill points on. So you have a handful of skills, pretty much all divided by your typical stuff, various weapon types, some magic types, and a few other things like alchemy and traps. Each one of these decides basically how much you can do with them in the general sense, yes, but once you click into them, they each have perks. You will still be leveling up, and it is here where you'll be spending your skill points. However, in order to unlock some of those, you first have to find skill books for a handful of them that are otherwise not available. The skill books seem to just kind of be laying around. And while that's all well and good so far, we've obviously got equipment and stuff to change out with that. The other thing that actually makes this really cool to me is that from there, it's really all about crafting and upgrading various things you might not expect. Because, for instance, by increasing your magic skills and getting the talents or perks in those, it enables you to actually upgrade your magic and make it stronger, and that way you can cast better spells as your magical aptitude goes up. And the same goes for traps or alchemy. The better you are at it and the more of those perks you pick up, the more you can craft and improve those things, allowing you to make potions that do all sorts of stuff. You even get the ability to throw potions if you lean into it, the ability to set all sorts of traps and sort of dominate the battlefield that way. And I will say all of that does seem especially necessary because otherwise the main combat system seems to just be like a series of various button combos for weapons, and given the nature of the game, it's a little floaty, and I think really the main draw here is how many things you can engage with to sort of mess around and approach combat the way you want. Like there's stealth and ranged options, things like that, but again, none of it feels like super visceral, as you could probably tell on screen. But again, given that this is an indie developer, and I believe their first game, pretty interesting stuff overall. But while there is plenty of combat to be had, the rest of the game I would say comes down to exploration and questing. So the game is divided up into a bunch of different zones that you can run around in. So like for instance, the little village you come to called Southvale Hamlet, first up is its own little zone, and then just south of that you have Forest Edge. that kind of thing, and each one of those zones is its own explorable thing, and within those zones there's a good bit to get up to. Exploration does the usual things, like exploring to find various chests and whatnot, which can give you upgrades for your equipment without necessarily having to buy it. You'll also find those skill books that I mentioned, but there's also other stuff that leans into that sense of humor that I mentioned. For instance, one of the, I guess you could call it a collectible, are these garden gnomes you need to destroy in order to help one particular guy out, which is very reminiscent of Fable, as I mentioned. And then there's a super early quest where you have to collect a debt from a guy who happens to be the butcher in town, and as he lures you into his murder basement, he is in fact chopping up basically everything to sell it as meat, people included, and you have to fight your way out of that situation. And there's just a lot of like little memorable stuff like that that draws you in more than you might initially think, which I think is looking to be the main draw of this. Not so much that it's like an incredible RPG or it's doing like incredibly innovative stuff, but mostly that it's just kind of fun, it's a little silly, and it seems like an RPG that's good for lightening the mood a little bit. In fact, one of my favorite moments with it so far, you come across this hunter in the woods who's looking for someone to help him take care of all these beasts that have been popping up, and he talks about how he's going to need some incredible hunter with fantastic skills, but obviously there's no one like that to be found, so he has to settle for you. Just little stuff like that. On top of that, another thing I've been pleasantly surprised with is how fun it is to explore the individual areas, thanks to both the fact that there's loot just about everywhere, but also they've really packed a lot of stuff into these dense little areas that kind of makes it feel like you're always discovering something as you move around through it, which I think obviously goes a pretty long way for a game like this. Now, I will say, as you could probably see on screen, there are plenty of limitations worth mentioning. In particular, as I move to review this title, something I'm going to be keeping in mind is, does combat evolve or does it stay relatively floaty the whole way through? Do the combos that you unlock via the various like perks and stuff you pick up actually feel impactful, or can you get through by just swinging your weapon any which way? Especially because this game doesn't really have a penalty for death like at all. So as you move around, you'll hit these little checkpoints called soul shrines. Soul as in the sun in this case, by the way. But if you die, you just respawn at those shrines and the enemies pop back up. But you don't lose anything and you don't lose progress. It saves all the time, so like you don't have to reload and redo something just because you died. At most, you'll have to kill a few enemies again, but that will just continue to give you experience that you don't lose, and you'll level up as you go. So while the game does have difficulty settings, given that and the overall sense of humor, I get the impression that despite the way some of the marketing is for it, which seems to be a little more serious, everything I'm getting from this impression-wise is just like a lighter sort of fun RPG in the vein of something like that original Fable as an example. So if that is of interest to you, you may well want to continue to keep an eye on this the way that I am, but again, as I mentioned, this game releases in full here in about 5 days. I currently need to finish up what I am actually working on, which should be another day or two. My hope is to be completely done with it by Thursday, which is tomorrow from the time you're hearing this, but not when I'm recording it. And once that's done, I'm going to turn my attention to this and try to get this done relatively quickly so I can get this out around the official release date, which should then put us right around the upcoming release of Beast of Reincarnation. But that's kind of what we're looking at here. Overall, first impressions wise, it's just kind of funny to me and enjoyable enough for what it is, and if the presentation doesn't bother you, it seems like a pretty good time at its release price of $35. But obviously, I'll go a little more in-depth come review time, but as for this particular video, that should in fact do it. So certainly hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about this one down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.